Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Sanctuary's Coffee and Conversation. My name is Myrna Haskell. I'm executive editor of Sanctuary Magazine. This is an online publication for women that empowers and inspires with a focus on women in the arts, women philanthropists, humanitarians, and business leaders who make a difference in their local or global communities, women's health and wellness, and a variety of topics in inspirational travel, career, and finance. You can find us at sanctuary-magazine.com. This morning, my guest is Joanna Frang. She is the fabulous executive director of the Barrett Art Center located in the city of Poughkeepsie in New York State. Welcome, Joanna.
Hello, and I'm so glad to be here. Thank
I
you for
know, I'm so
including
happy to
me.
have you today too. And I just, so listeners know, I attended the opening of two fabulous exhibitions you have going on right now, Directions 2020, and then the solo show, The View from Here, with artist Ransom. And they were just terrific, and they're running through November 14th. So I wanted to let listeners know, if you're familiar with the magazine, you can look at a short report under Myrna's Musings or visit Barrett Art Center to see more about how you can visit those exhibitions if you're in the area. But anyway, today, our subject is inclusion and community building through the arts. And so my first question for you, Joanna, is how do you feel arts programs and arts events in general lift communities?
Well, there's a couple answers to that question, and I think it's something that we think about all the time, and a lot of people, your readers at the Sanctuary are thinking about that as artists or as art lovers. When I think about community uplift, anybody who I work with in the arts, we kind of like naturally accept that connection between the arts and individual emotional expression and self-actualization as being kind of all individually positive things. So like on an aggregate, that can only create an a community of people who are expressively fulfilled and have is a lifted community. So I think that might be my experience and understanding. And for anybody who might not come from an arts background or kind of be naturally inclined to it, there's also all sorts of kind of data-driven studies from, we're lucky in the US to have the National Endowment for the Arts and American Federation from the Arts that show us like these very tangible, positive, real impacts that that the arts can have to uplift a community, on a real practical, granular level, like, for example, ticket sales and art purchases, the sales tax from those things go back to local communities and programs that serve communities and can lift them up through that, like that very granular. But then, there's a lot of work, and something I'm excited about. I don't know if you know much about creative placemaking.
No, please let me know.
Yeah, so I think it's this idea that artists and art organizations and community leaders and politicians and developers can all come to the table together, and that the arts gets put on the table next to land use and transportation, infrastructure,
I love that.
economic development, all of that. And
The whole
arts
village, right? It's the whole,
right.
yes, the whole community together.
And when you do that and you think about like public arts and murals and outdoor festivals, even lighting for public safety can be well designed and beautiful to make like a parking lot safer. All of those things together, you see that the arts isn't just icing on a cake of the community to make it pretty, or croutons in the salad. It's kind of more like the yeast in the bread that makes
I love that analogy.
So it makes it greater than the sum of its parts. They're not all distinct. It kind of links it all together. So I think that's the kind of uplift that a lot of us who are cultural workers, who kind of organize artists and link them with community members, see that that it has a positive impact. And that's why we have to be involved in advocacy and sitting at political meetings and going to common councils or getting involved in your local local community in that way. We can't just be alone looking at beautiful art all the time. Although
Oh,
I
I
love
love that. I
doing that.
love that. And I think we've all seen communities that have been transformed like that too, right? Even communities right around New York State, where all of a sudden you see this really heavy art presence, and it's almost like the heart of the community is beating louder in general or something. It's a feel that you get, and everything seems to be more positive and sort of uplifting in those communities, and you start seeing people taking care of their lawns better even. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
that link between like individual creative to the collective creativity and kind of community building. Like it goes all the way through. It's just kind of permeates.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. So here's my next question. So I know you've had a lot of great programs. I've been to some of them, but I was hoping you could tell us about some of the successful programs in the last couple of years that you particularly thought resonated or made the community enthusiastic.
So, so I'm lucky to have been here for 5 years now, but this organization's been here since the 1930s.
Right.
And so since we were founded in the Depression at an equally unprecedented time, in terms of what the community was facing, we've always been a community facing organization to connect artists to the community. And one thing that we've really leaned in on is our local area. We're a small organization, so what kind of impact can we have? And instead of having a big, broad, across our community impact, we decided to do some of those things with artist talks, and we bring in national artists to serve this very local community, and to really hone in and have an impact with like our block. Like literally we thought about what's the place where we can move the needle, and that was with the people who live on our block. um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Start with who you can see and feel right next to you, right? And then you branch from there. I love that.
so it's those stepping stones of creating community.
Hmm.
And what we did is we canvassed our neighbors door to door, and most of them had never been here. So that told us we were missing an audience. We,
That's
as
right.
someone who's serving the community, if our neighbors don't know that we're here, boy, we've got some work to do.
Yeah,
And people don't know that there's a party unless they get invited. And
that's
that's our
right.
role. Like that's our job.
Right.
Uh,
It sounds easy, but yeah, until you really
um,
dig in, then you realize who you're missing, right? So yeah.
so we found out from our neighbors that many of them are working class, working multiple jobs, and after school, their young, elementary age kids would benefit from our resources of arts and artists, and from some adult help with some academic support for their homework. So what we did was take what we have, which are artists and amazing art in our exhibitions, and bring that to the need of the community, which was for after school. So we created an artist residency, where a local artist, in exchange for teaching after school a few days a week, gets a really kind of gorgeous studio in this
I
historic
love that.
building for free. And it's an exchange. All of the organizations on our block are also involved. So we have a library on one end, we have an elementary school on the other, we have a few other local galleries. So we're creating, kind of stitching together this community through this program.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, it's been terrible. 2020 is the twilight zone, right? I mean, the international pandemic, it's been really, really hard on a lot of people, the isolation, the business shuttering, the whole thing. And so I wanted to ask you about how you personally feel that the arts helped people cope probably during the worst of this, when it was first happening and we couldn't visit our elderly relatives at all, and all of that was going on. How do you feel that the arts helped people cope and helped lift their spirits?
Gosh. Um, well, especially during this time, right? Like
Yeah.
that's always a function of the arts. Is that's the whole idea behind art therapy, is that there's there's a real way to connect people's emotional health with viewing art and creating art. But I think with social distancing and feeling alienated, I think the beauty of the creative process, it's, you know, an individual artist, their expression of creation, especially for visual artists, finds its ultimate fulfillment in someone actually engaging with the art. So it's implicit that like there's a social connection here, that an artist creates something and someone views it and connects. And we, I think across the board, artists individually and arts organizations, we pivoted within a week or two. Most arts organizations had shifted their programming online, realizing that this is an important emotional kind of leg up, something to help people get through this. And that bodes well, despite these economic hardships that we're facing, is that kind of resilience.
Yes, definitely.
That I think is one way that the arts has shown that we're going to get through this. You know, like we don't have a ton of money. We're not going to be able to do everything we used to, but we're still creating. Like there's this thing that we are expressing that still needs to be expressed, and we're creating those connections online.
Forge forward, move on, still find your passion and your inspiration, right? That whole
Absolutely.
idea is what keeps people moving forward in general. Yeah.
And
So
it's
yeah, go ahead, Joanna.
I was just going to say it's this kind of, you build off someone else's inspiration and they build off someone else's, and it just this creative energy just gets exchanged.
You know, I'm wondering a little bit about your journey through this whole thing. So from, you know, the original complete shutdown, you know, you had exhibitions obviously raring to go, or ones that were, you know, up, and then you were told to shut down, and then all the way through when things started to change, and then having to segue into an opening. You know, what adjustments did you have to make? And if you could just talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
That is the one of the most surreal moments of this for me that I didn't expect. We had an opening scheduled for the week that New York shut down, and that we were no longer, like, we had a show up, it was ready to go. It was, so for 6 weeks, and we were all at home. So for 6 weeks, this show just sat on the walls and no one was here. And we had all of the digital images and we shared all of those, and we're really working hard to engage. But it was just such an odd thought to have this art here with no people. And it's just a surreal thought of all of the museums, all of the performance spaces that were quiet. It kind of hit something in me, like kind of underneath my belly, that still is a little bit this anxiety that's left over from that moment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Or even like a PTSD kind of thing, because we don't know what's happening, right? It's this, it's that the rules were changing constantly. We didn't know what was happening from one day to the next, you know? I mean, novel virus. I mean, the experts didn't know what was going on initially.
Yeah,
So
that's a good
you're
point.
flying by the seat of your pants, like literally.
And I mean, I would say being a woman and a working woman, there are many days that I fly by the seat of my pants, but
Me too.
this was a whole new level.
It was a whole new level for sure.
I think, you know, seeing the across the board museums furlough, and, you know, over half of museums aren't expected to come out, and galleries aren't expected to survive this. But what we are able to do, and to do safely now that we have the knowledge, is to open up partially, with the attention to creating really meaningful connections in really safe ways. And
Yes.
it's possible. And audiences should know that with precautions, unless you have underlying health conditions, it is restorative. I can't say enough. If you liked arts before, seeing art in person after being on your computer for 6 months will really just tweak something in you, even if you didn't know you didn't like arts. It's just something tactile and exciting. Um,
Well, you
and I,
felt it in the room this past weekend, right? I certainly did. I ran into an artist from New York City. One of her pieces was chosen, and everybody was just so happy to talk to people, at a safe distance, but everybody had their masks on, but you could just feel the excitement that everybody was there at an actual show,
yeah.
It was
So,
tangible.
yes, and that's an impact that you can't quantify. But it's, in addition to making these virtual turns and having everything online, doing our artist talks online for now, instead of in the galleries. We're all, I think, personally at Barrett and at any art space, we're kind of re-envisioning how space works. The idea of telling someone this is the exact route you have to walk in a room to experience art is just kind of a whole new concept. The idea that limiting the number of visitors is
Right.
I mean, the benchmark rather has always been increasing the number of visitors, and for now we want to decrease that, and we're able to do that and get people in this space in a really safe way. And more than ever, I think having people who across the board are experiencing really rough times, no matter what industry you're in, I've never seen like opening an email with a small donation in it, or opening an actual snail mail. Someone who writes, we've gotten more than a few of these. If someone who says, I don't have a lot right now, but I believe in what you do, here's $5 or here's $10.
That lifts your day, right?
And that you can float on that for a while.
Yes.
So those are the kinds of things that, remain true, that we love appreciation, but it's just changed the way we think about it. And I'm just so grateful that we're still here, and able to do this, because I think I guess you do too, that it's just necessary.
Yeah, and I know that we talked about this really briefly before when we've met, but you have this Barrett at Home section, which is now your whole virtual section with virtual exhibitions and artist talks and programs and crafts that parents can do with their kids at home in that whole space. Do you see yourself keeping that arm of the business even once we're entirely over the pandemic?
Gosh, I can hardly prognosticate about what things will be like in the future.
True.
And at the same time, I don't think we'll go back to not having that investment. I think it's as we're able to increase our capacity and get our hours back and support staff to do that, we'll continue that and the galleries.
Yeah, and I think a lot of businesses are going to do that, Joanna, because the future is online resources anyway, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're always going to have the people that can't, for one reason or another, get to the exhibition in person. And we've talked about this straddling local and global. And you do have artists from around the world whose, pieces are picked for your various national juried exhibitions. So, I think it's, in a way, maybe that's the positive we can take out of this, that we had to learn some new things and that we had to grow our experience in the virtual space. And then maybe we can always have this sort of hybrid, here's what you can do when you come in person, but if you can't, look, we have this other space, right? So it's probably a positive to take out of the whole thing.
I think so. And we're meeting people where they are in a new way, that, at 1 a.m, someone might want to see some art and might want to do a craft because they're up, for some reason with a baby who's awake and they want to, do something online.
That's a good point. Yeah. So I just love all this information you've given the listeners. Thank you so much. But I'm hoping that you could tell our listeners, how they can find Barrett, reach you, maybe some of the things you have planned toward the end of the year. And then as we launch into 2021, which will hopefully be better than 2020, you want to talk about that for a minute or two?
Yeah, if we survive 2020 and with no locusts or, other plagues or floods, I think we'll be in a good position to do some really exciting things. Um, so all of what we have offered is on our website, which is barrettartcenter.org. And we have a Facebook and Instagram. Facebook has our online and in-person events, and Instagram is kind of just a mix of what's happening. Um, so in the immediate term, we've got, for art lovers, we offer things for artists and creatives, and we offer things for art lovers. So for art lovers or people interested in learning more about the artists who are in our shows, we've got a series of 4 awesome artist talks coming up. So 3 series of artist talks from New Directions, which is a national juried exhibition of kind of the broad swath of cutting edge contemporary art. And one of artist talk virtual again, is Ransom, who is local, but he also straddles this kind of a divide that his artwork is talking about, the kind of suburban, rural to urban divide within the United States, in a metaphor that kind of harkens back to James Baldwin talking about being in France during the civil rights protests in the 1960s. So these 2 kind of bridging different divides. And Ransom is just it's an amazing show.
Yes,
And
it is. It is. I can attest
he's
to that. Yeah. Thank you.
yeah,
Well, you know what,
yeah.
Joanna, so in the current October issue of Sanctuary, one of my Southern California writers did an interview with Susan Collegian, and she's a theater director out that way. And she had this new theater company that she was launching just a few weeks before the shutdown. And she scrambled to find ways to bring theater to the community. So that's a really cool article. But I just have to read this one quote from that interview where she says, if you're a performer, your soul doesn't want to do anything else. If you're an artist, you have to create. It's not like something you can choose to turn on or to turn off. So I thought we'd end with that because, the
Yeah.
artists, they were highly affected by this, but they were still out there trying to do stuff for us online. And, they're just driven to do what they do, and we're the lucky ones that they are. That's kind of how I see it.
No, I was just thinking about, as a cultural worker, I appreciate and I get to present all of the work of artists. And as someone who, is also talks to other women about this all the time, is about self-care, and appreciating the amount that artists, like, because it's innate in them, that they're creating and giving to the community and helping us kind of deal with COVID and deal with feeling alienated, that they also, we have to appreciate what they're giving to us, and remind all of the artists out there, and I should be reminding all of my artist members to refill their cup and make sure that they're
Absolutely.
taken care of. And yeah, so I appreciate that on all sorts of levels, and it's so true. So yeah, it's in there.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's always so wonderful to talk to you. You're just like this unending wealth of knowledge on the arts, on where to find the best artists, what's happening in the communities around. Just to tell you really quickly, I noticed that MoMA has a new playlist out to help people relax and deal with the stress of what we're going through. I don't know if you saw that. I think I just saw it in social media yesterday. So see, all the centers, Joanna, what you're doing for the city of Poughkeepsie is just phenomenal. So thank you so much from me, for the bottom of my heart. But anyway, I'd like to close, as I always do, by wishing all of our listeners and our reader community good health, happiness, and continued inspiration. I'll be seeing you soon.